Welcome to another episode of Truth Reveal podcast. We're so glad that you're joining us one more time. We're here just to host a conversation today as we reconcile to relate and uncover God's truth. I am part of the Truth Reveal team. This is April Rivers, and we have
Holly Harris.
And Latricia P, aka Sweet.
Amen. And we've got a special guest with us this evening, but we're going to introduce her in one moment. If you're watching this on YouTube, of course, you see her beautiful face. But we want to introduce a topic today because we just celebrated Mother's Day. And to all our listeners out there, we just want to wish you a happy belated Mother's Day.
Yay.
And to all the women, all the aunties that babysit for the mothers, happy partial Mother's Day to you too. We kind of tossed around a topic around parenthood. And before we even start this topic, I want to make a few disclaimers. This topic is not to put any undue stress on anyone as far as parenthood is concerned. We're going to talk about the changes in attitude to even having children and family. What we've noticed just off of the stuff that we researched and what I've noticed personally just by TV shows I've watched, movies that I've seen, just attitudes that I've just kind of seen portrayed where children are being seen more of a burden than a blessing. At one point in time in our lives and in history, children were just seen for legacy, even seen as a part of wealth. The more children you had to carry on a business or to run, to have your land, to run a farm, to do all kinds of things. But now it's kind of seen as basically a burden. A lot more people, statistically speaking, are making the choice, married couples are making the choice not to have children. And I'm going to get into some statistics with you. Just the percentages of married couples in the 1970s who had children. 57% of married couples in the 1970s had children. And this is, and it says now in the 2019s or 2016, 18, and 19, it dropped to 38% of all married couples.
Wow.
Yes, have children. Now, mind you, this is children under the age of 18. Okay, so they're doing it where just you still have young kids in the family, but yeah. So it's really daunting, the change in that. And then there was another statistic that we looked at that had the number of kids per families in the 1960s or 1970s, averaged about 3 kids per family. Going on to our current day, they didn't do 2020, but as far as up to 2019. Now, I don't know what 1.5 kids is, but
1.5.
That the average now is around 1.5 to 2 children. All right. So we see a kind of difference in the shift on that. And we're going to get into even some deeper things about articles that we've read and get this discussion going. But now I want to introduce our special guest, our first guest of the Truth Reveal podcast. Tami Gould. We want to welcome and introduce her to the podcast. I'm going to ask her a few questions, but I just want to intro her like this. She is a friend of ours, just as me, Sweet, and Holly know each other from college. That's how we've met. She's a mom. She's a real estate mogul. She's
all right. Yes, sir.
She's a wife, and I'm going to let her get into some things about her. Tammy, how many children do you have?
I have 2 boys.
You had 2 boys. What's their ages?
Yeah. 11. They are twinsies.
They are twinsies. So she had twinsies. And I stated that you are a wife. How long you been married?
Oh my gosh. Married 15 years.
Oh,
Lord.
hallelujah.
Wow.
Everybody
Glory
tell
to
God, thank
God.
you.
Thank you.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Uh-huh. All right. All right. And I'm going to, of course, start the discussion since we're asking questions. We're going to start the discussion with you, Tammy,
Okay.
and then everybody else knows to chime in. But I want to ask you, did you and your spouse always want kids? And you can go back to whether when you were single, did you think about having kids? And then when y'all were getting engaged and talking about marriage, had y'all kind of planned kids in the whole marriage bit?
Well, we always had the thought that if God blesses us with kids, then we're going to have them.
Right.
It's not like we were like, oh, we got to have X amount of kids. And that wasn't our focus. It's like whenever the time comes, it's like that's when it's going to happen. I think a lot of people stress themselves out when they're like, okay, I want to have a child at this moment in time. It's like, no, we were just like, whenever it happens, because a lot of times, like early in our relationship, people are like, are y'all gonna have kids? Because it was a long time before we had them. I think we were married 4 years before we had kids.
You said 4?
Yeah.
Four.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
I think
wow.
it was 4, and we dated. We were together 4 years before. So
Oh,
yeah,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
we got married in 04, and we didn't have the boys until like 09. So
Hmm.
yeah,
That's-
so it
Okay.
was a long time. So when it happened, it happened. It
My
was a
Lord.
All right.
surprise.
You got double for your trouble.
Double for you. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think I got another question. I think you kind of already answered, but there
Mhm.
may be more to it. So prior to having kids, you said y'all were kind of, you were relaxed as far as, if the Lord blesses you, when He blesses you. But did you have a number in mind? Did you or your husband have a number in mind?
Um, I
Let me
want to
rephrase it,
say
Tammy. Did y'all have a number where you said no more than X?
3 was a good number.
Okay.
3 was a
Okay.
good number. But I always felt because I waited so long
Mm-hmm.
because I was already into my 30s. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, maybe I'll start a little bit earlier. But after
Yeah.
we had the boys, we were like, 2 is good.
Yeah.
2 is a good number. But I think because we had 2 at one time,
yeah.
Amen.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's quite the
That's
challenge.
a lot. 2 newborns is a
Wow.
lot.
It's a lot.
All right. Okay. All right. And then you've already answered the other question. I was going to ask you where they plan, but y'all have the when, and when it happens, it happens.
Mhm.
All right. And so for our audience out here listening, we all read an article called Want to Save Your Marriage. And then it had a question mark, and then I think it had a semicolon. Then it said, don't have kids. Now,
Wow.
I read this article, and I'm going to be honest, I was mad like after the first paragraph and upset. And I have introduced myself to the World Wide Web of the podcast. You all know that I'm no longer married, but I did not agree with a lot of the sentiments of this article. Okay. And I'm just going to summarize it for you, and then we're just gonna go. The essential thing about the article was basically the gentleman who wrote it, and then we found this. The source will be in a link below, but it was theguardian.com, I believe I was on, and found this article. And essentially, he said that children make for an unhappy marriage. That once children are introduced into the marriage, even though they said you're more likely to stay together because of the kids, you'll be together miserable.
Lord, gee.
Yes, it was very, but you know what? I'm not going to dog the author because it's a real reason. People really
Mm,
feel this way. And this kind of is one side, but of why people are no longer having children like they were, or even the attitude. Because even if you don't have any children, because it's no sin not to desire kids. So if you don't want to have any children, we are not saying anything's wrong with that. But it's, you cannot have children and still believe that children are good things, that you know what I'm saying,
Right.
that they are a
mm-hmm.
blessing and not a burden, and that if it so happened that you and your spouse were to get pregnant, you wouldn't be in depression. They wouldn't have to come, get you out of the corner from crying, but you would look at it as that. um let's roll into the topic. And who wants to start? Just give me what y'all initial reactions were to what y'all read. Anybody?
Tammy.
Not
Judging
all
Honestly.
speak at once. We're gonna let our guests go first.
Well, with this article, I found it very interesting, but I know people that are married and don't want kids, and I get it. Um, Having kids, it is tough. It is challenging. It's expensive. It's a lot of things, and I get it. But I think it's because we are so different now as far as people. We are very um, selfish. We are very focused on ourselves these days, and we don't want to detract or take away our own happiness. And it's crazy to me that like things are so far gone now. It's like, okay, I'll get married, but I'm not going to procreate.
Yeah,
It's like,
right,
isn't
right,
that
right,
part of the package?
right,
Isn't that part of why you get married? You need to
Mm,
make little
right.
me's. You need to
Yeah.
make little versions of yourself. Um, if you don't want to if you don't want to have kids, I mean, I understand because you look at it, somebody may have had a bad childhood
mm,
and they may say, I don't want to bring anybody into this because they may be off kilter. Everybody may not need to have kids. I get that. There are a lot of people that have kids and we're like, okay, you don't need to have.
my Lord.
And they seem like they have the most kids.
Yeah.
It's like,
Okay.
Exactly.
you know, but as far as the article, I can understand, parts of, why people say, I don't want to have kids. I don't, I want to be married. I want to continue to live my life. I want to travel. I want to do all these different things, and kids will slow me down, and the article talking about like your general happiness, like that's basically gone after you have
Right.
kids.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I can just say from my relationship, um, my husband and I, we were really good friends and we built a good foundation
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
before we had kids.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm,
that will always be there. I don't care, what happens. It's like those kids can be gone, but we'll still be friends. And I think that is something that a lot of relationships are missing. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
relationships, they become robotic when you have kids sometimes because you have to like go beyond that. It's like who's picking up the kids? What's for dinner? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what activity do they have? Okay, it's Monday. We have this, that, and the other. It's busy, but you just
Mm,
have to learn how to balance. A lot of people just don't want to put in the work.
Come on.
wow.
And I
Come
think
on.
that's at the end of the day, I think that's what it is. People don't want to put in the work.
Wow.
So,
What do you think, Tammy, as far as do you think that the unhappiness is more so linked towards kids not being in their proper place? And what I mean by that is I know some people say your kids should come first, but then other
mhm.
people say your relationship should come first and then your children. So do you think the unhappiness is more so linked to the children, being given all of the the time or, you know,
Yeah, that can be part of it. I think that's a major part that wives or mothers put their kids ahead of their husbands a lot of the time. A lot of the time, majority, just because we're like, well, my husband, he's grown, he can take care of himself. And I think that's the attitude that we have.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have this little person, okay, this little person needs my attention. They need everything that mommy can give. And you were talking about kids being in place, but I think everybody's out of place right now, as far as the husband, the wife, nobody knows, like, the roles, who knows what roles exist anymore.
Wow. Good point.
And I think because everybody's out of place, everybody's stressed, everybody's crazy, and that ends up throwing everybody for a loop. Because we don't know where we're supposed to be. Everybody's out of the house working. Back in the day, you had the mama at home taking care of the kids. The daddy was working, bringing home the bacon. It's just completely different now because mamas are out of the house, daddies are out of the house, the kids are in all these activities. There's no balance, I think. And I think that's been a major problem. But the focus is a lot of times on the kids, and the husband gets put to the wayside. and then comes the divorce.
Wow.
Yeah. Usually after you have kids, your focus, it shifts. And it's like, it's hard to get that focus when you need to focus on your kids as well as your husband, because your husband has needs. I'm just speaking from a wife perspective. Your husband has needs. The kids have needs. You're working. You're doing all these other things. And it's like, well, a lot of women are like, I don't want to do all that. It's too much.
Yeah.
A lot of women I know are the bread earners, make more than their husband. So they're like, I gotta work.
Wow.
At the end of the day, who's gonna rub whose feet?
I'm telling you.
Look, you put your feet on one end, I put mine on the other. We rub each other.
Yeah. So.
Oh gosh. Well, I want Holly and Sweet, just because y'all are single with no kids, y'all not off the hook on this whole situation. Because as single people, that's when we make the mental decision. That's when we start making the mental decision in our mind whether this will be marriage and children, or this will just be espousal with doing everything within my power not to procreate. So talk to me about y'all attitudes, whether y'all want children and why or why not, and kind of where you see some of the influences are in you making your decisions on whether to or to not have children.
Okay. Oh, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think that, I do want to have children. But I've never been the type of woman that, my biological clock is ticking, I need to procreate immediately, and even though I'm almost 42 and maybe I should be, have that thought, I still am kind of relaxed about the idea. I do want to have children. I think as a young girl, I was more focused on, accomplish my goals, dreams, all that kind of stuff. But, of course, as you get older, you desire companionship, you desire a family. And so I do desire that. But I'm not anxious about it. And because I've always looked at it as adoption is always an option for me if for some reason I am unable. I want to push at least one baby out, but and then maybe adopt the rest. But it's definitely something that I do want to do. But I do understand why some people don't want to have children. Because they may not want the responsibility. And then, just like I said, just being, 42, some of us are waiting later to get married. And so by the time you do get married, you may or may not be able to have children. I believe God that I'll be a Sarah, be able to marry.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Look, we rebuke an early menopause in Jesus'
In the
name.
mighty
Amen.
name of
Hallelujah.
Jesus. But at least one, I want to have from myself and then be able to adopt others. But that's basically the gist of how I feel about it. But I definitely do desire to have children. Yeah.
All right, sweet.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Holly a little bit as a younger woman, because I'm 40 going on 41. I never really focused a lot about kids and marriage and things of that nature, because my take was very nonchalant, like, oh yeah, I'll get married and have kids. It was just something that I saw as a um, something that was just going to happen. I never put a lot of energy into it. And I kind of talked about this on a previous podcast, but literally around 35, I had like a whole mini midlife crisis. And I was like, I have kids. I'm not married. And I just started acting real crazy. Like I started having anxiety about that. So the desire is still there. Unlike Holly, I am a little bit anxious about it. And I do have to be intentional about my thought process, about not being anxious. Literally today, someone asked me, oh, you don't have kids? You didn't want kids? And my response was, well, I actually wanted a husband.
Yeah, first.
Yeah, like
Please.
kind of wanted to, follow the bouncing ball there. But, the older you get, the more you realize, not that 40 is too old to have kids, because like Tami was stating, we're in a different generation where a lot of people are having children later in life. Women decided to go back to school and do all these other things and have pursuits. And then it's like, okay, yeah, now I have kids because I have these things checked off the list. And although that wasn't my initial desire, is definitely where I find myself. I'm very, very open to adoption. That's something that I've always wanted to do. Even as a young child, I've always had a desire to adopt. So even when I looked at my life in a matter of fact way of having children, I always saw adoption being a part of that process, as well as biologically having children. So I do still desire that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna add my little 2 cents in here. Um, uh, I have my 2 boys. I'm How old am I? I'm 42. I have my my 13-year-old and my 8-year-old. And when I was married, those children were born from a marriage that I'm no longer in. But when I was married, we actually planned both the kids. And what I mean by plan is literally, it was kind of like, we should have a baby now. And I stopped taking birth control and I got pregnant, like just like for both times. So like it was very strategic. I didn't have like a, oops, I'm pregnant. But when I was prior to being married, I always wanted kids. And I'm gonna tell you honestly, y'all, I took my cues. I thought I was gonna be Claire Huxtable. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger, and I wanted 5 kids. I was gonna do it all: career and a house full of youngins. But anyway, within the marriage, it was planned, and my attitude towards children was always just, I don't know. My attitude toward having kids was always like a value, an asset, like
Mm,
being able to create another being with someone you love, legacy,
yeah.
being able to kind of pour in like the stuff, especially when I became a believer, because I always thought I can raise someone in the faith of this little person, and I
Mm,
can sow into them, not just feeding them, clothing them, but I can teach them what I wish I knew when I was little, real
mhm.
little, because I didn't specifically grow up in the church. My parents didn't start going to church, so I was in my teens. So I just kind of thought of it like that, and that's another thing that kind of baffles me amongst believers. Like it's one thing to come from one worldview, but when you're coming from a biblical worldview, amongst believers, it baffles me when I get you know, I'm crying in the corner because I found out we're pregnant. And I'm talking about a married couple, seemingly healthy marriage, uh, financially decent, may not be millionaires, but y'all are okay. That baffles me because I always thought that go off of Psalm 127 that says, um, that children are a heritage of the Lord and the fruit of the womb is his reward. I kind of
Yes.
built off of that. So I don't know, it just kind of baffles me how the attitudes change. And also, even with the unexpected pregnancies within a marriage, we know that sperm plus
Yeah.
egg
Come
equals
on, teach
baby.
us. Teach us.
And birth control is not 100%. I don't care what birth control you use. There's always this little
Truly.
window of something might go down. So anyway, I just had to say that for myself that my children were playing, and even now as a single parent, I wouldn't take it back. Like if I went back and knew I'd be a single parent, I still would have my babies because when I was with my spouse, we looked at it as a blessing. We created memories, with the children, and it actually binded us actually together in other funny ways. You know what I mean? Like we both tied together. The baby won't stop crying. I'm looking at him. He looking at me. You're like, what we gonna do? And I want you to speak to that, Tammy. Can you kind of speak to, because I really hope that this is actually really encouraging for mothers and encouraging for uh, married couples, period, that, it's going to be okay. Like, really specifically, if there is a parent listening to us, a couple listening to us, and they found out they were pregnant and they did not react in the way that was like they were happy. You want to make sure, and this is not no condemnation or anything, but you don't want a seed of rejection, to be there as if, now you're
Yeah.
carrying something that's unwanted. So just to encourage them, Tammy, can you speak to how kind of the children, the chaoticness, I'm sure, of having twins bonded you and your husband? Some moments where y'all was like, all we got,
Oh my God.
Girl,
All we got. All we got.
it's funny. And we said that recently, like we all we got, like, for real. Like we are all we got. I think it does bond you. I think having kids makes you grow so much. And kids are a mirror. Like you see things, you're like, oh my gosh, that is me. Do I act like that for real? Like for real. You'll see a lot of things. But I think kids have bonded us together. Like I said, me and my husband we're really great friends. And, having the kids, you're like, gosh, what happened? We just sit and talk like we're somebody's parents, like for real. Like, people do that, like we have kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's funny, but I think it bonded us like early on having twins because there was no, oh, you get the baby and I go to sleep. Oh no, I got one, you got one. So, but yeah, it was a challenge. I remember how they came over one
Yes,
time. She was like,
Lord.
"Oh Lord," both of them crying.
Oh, I said, oh, Tammy. That's exactly. I looked at her. One started crying, then the other one. I was like, "You poor thing."
Yes, but it's okay because they make you grow, and they make you grow together. And I mean, you come up with ways like you grow as a person. You grow as a unit. Is it tough? Yes, but that's just life.
Right.
And people don't want to deal with the tough, and that's the problem. But I think having kids made us grow. I know it made me grow. And as a couple, I think we grew together. We grew up like, okay, this is not about us anymore.
Wow.
Right.
And it was,
Mhm.
you have to come out of your selfish ways
Mhm.
when you become parents.
Yeah.
And with the boys, I know we just had to work together, period. Like our lives daily had to be strategic, like everything that we did, every moment, like, okay, at this time this happens, this time this happens. We had to be scheduled because it was two babies. We were both working. You know, life was crazy and chaotic, but it was okay. It was our life and it was fine. And I think that's the thing people don't want to deal with. They don't want to deal with all the crazy that comes along with it, but it makes you better. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. And I know some people that they've told me like their kids literally saved their lives
Wow.
Yeah.
because they were kind of the, here's the term that said, my kids saved me from a ratchet life. That
Hallelujah.
Amen.
verbatim, that's what they said. And I was like,
Wow.
wow. And then somebody else told me recently, like, okay, y'all know how I was before I had my kids. And now you see how I am now. It makes you grow. It really does. It takes the focus off of just you.
Yes.
And it makes you think about others. It makes you think about how you can contribute, what you can give. It's not all about what you can take because
That's right.
you have to divide yourself and like figure it out. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. It really is a challenge, and a lot of people are not up for that challenge. And maybe it's their coping mechanisms. I don't know. You can look at it from a psychological standpoint because everybody's not ready for all the responsibility.
Yeah.
But I
I,
just know as a unit, it made me and Jock grow. Go ahead, sweetie.
I have a question, Tammy.
Mhm.
Kind of like a piggyback off of April's question. So you guys had twins, and kind of tying this into the article. I know the article made references, and I know you and April both could probably speak to this, but I can imagine it being even more hectic and stressful with two kids at the same time, at the same age. At what point in time do you guys feel like you got back to a quote unquote place of normalcy? Like after having, even if that's
Probably like
even
never.
happened, not, like I know like now your life is, it's a routine, but
Yeah.
like this is your life. You have two kids, they're active. You've been doing this for 11 years. But initially
Mhm.
when you had those babies and you were having to adjust, at what point was it that it was like, how many years, how many months where it was like, okay, this is what we're doing now. Okay, this is it.
Oh gosh. I don't I don't know. That's crazy. It's like you just do it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if there's like a particular time that you're like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. Everything's always changing. There's always stages. It's always different. So everything it's like you're starting over sometimes. Like you go through this baby stage. Okay, I'm done with that. That was your normal. Oh, now it's the toddler stage. Oh, this is something different. You know, they go to school. Boom, there's something different. So I don't think there's ever like a time where you're like, oh, this is our normal. It's always changing.
Mm.
I
Wow.
would say it's just becoming something different. Because some people are like, oh, it'll get better. Like, okay, it just becomes different at each stage, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, those
Yeah.
are just the stages you go through. I know April can tell you, you know, that it's just different stages. You know, it's like you get used to this one thing for a minute,
Yeah.
and then here comes something else.
That's
Wow.
right.
You know, I know you have two kids that are different ages, so you keep going through the same, you know,
Right.
you go through it
Repeat.
one, yeah, then you have a repeat. I'm going
Wow.
through it with the two at the same age, and I'm like, gosh, now we're getting into the preteens, and I'm like, oh gosh, another phase, and you feel the shift. You're like, okay, it's coming, and
Yeah.
it's kind of scary, but I'm ready. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a certain time that you're like, oh, this is my normal. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
And to add to what Sweet was saying too, even the part, and I think she's getting at this too, in the article where it talks about the marital impact. So getting back to dating, and not getting
Yeah.
not put you want to put your business out there, but even it talks about the impact on the sex life, and like for me, it's funny because when I had my son, I don't mind. I ain't telling nothing to embarrass my ex-husband or anything like that, but
Share
I
it.
don't care. I don't care.
Tell
I'm
it.
transparency, but like Tami said, it's always ever changing. Once you get used to one thing, it keeps you on your toes because now you're in another phase. And the baby phase goes by, the toddler, the this, the that. But when it came to the phases of our marriage and how it impacted, I thought surely I was transitioning well when it came to intimacy with my husband. I thought I was doing great. And I heard him talking to somebody. Well, no, he wasn't talking to someone. He was talking to me about, he said, his coworker used to always tell him that, having kids, in his marriage is just, the sex is not the same and it slowed down. And he was like, I thought, well, whatever, that's you. That's not my marriage. But he was like, well, I guess he was right. And I was like, what?
Oh, baby, no.
I was like, are you kidding me? But what happened, I think it was a good thing because it it helped me, even though some people look at that with male and female and think, oh, men just dirty and that's all they think about. But no, I needed my spouse to jolt me out of, I'm not just a mommy. I'm still a woman. You know what I'm saying? Because if I
My
didn't
God.
have someone to say, hey, you remember the things we used to do? Like, it's been about 4 months, or whatever, 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it is. But I needed to be jolted out of not having my identity only consumed as mom. So,
Yes,
so yeah.
girl, it's easy to fall into that.
Ah.
Yeah.
It is so easy to fall into that. That you're mommy,
Yeah.
and that's the role you play. It's like, no, you're a wife first.
That's right. That's how you became mommy.
Yeah, yeah, that is how you became mommy, and that's the tough part, and that's the balance, and that's
Yeah.
the issue. I think because it's the woman deals with so much stuff,
Yeah.
so much stuff. I mean, I know men deal with a lot of things as well, but I think women have so much more that we're carrying as far as, you're still mommy, you're still wife, you're still daughter, you're still all these things, and it's heavy. And we're not meant to carry this so much.
That's right.
And I don't think people understand that as women, we're not meant to carry so much of a load. And people are like, I don't want to do all that. Well, baby,
Oh, geez.
you can get through it. You can.
Right.
It's tough, and that's what I see when I read this article, is that people don't want to deal with the heavy. They don't want to deal with the things that will make them grow. They just want to do what they want to do. That's just
I just want to have fun.
That's it. I just want to have fun.
Just wanna
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, what would you like? What advice would you offer to mothers trying to master that balance? Because I mean, I can only imagine just the load, like you said, and and then there are a lot of women who are the breadwinners,
Oh yeah.
and they expected to come home, cook, clean, take care of the children, have sex with their husbands. It's a lot to manage. Like, how do you I don't even know if there is a way to, but if there are any tips that you can offer uh, on how to try and at least try to achieve that balance.
Well, I've mentioned this before to you guys that, we try to cut our debt. We don't try to keep up with the Joneses. We don't focus on material things a lot. And I think when you do that, then a lot of things will fall into place because you're not so focused on, oh, I got to make all this money. I got to drive this this Land Rover. I got to drive this, and I got to live in this neighborhood. And we've always adjusted. You know, we've always, looked at our budget and say, okay, what can we do? Because I don't necessarily want to work all the time.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
Yes, because I need to have some energy to give to my family.
Right.
And at the end of the
Yes.
day, that is what I want. And so my advice would be to really look at, what you're spending, try to live on less. Try
That's
your best.
good.
Try your best to live on less. And that way you're not so worried about, oh, well, I have to work these hours or I have to do this. And the earlier you do it in your relationship, the better. So if you're newly married, try to stack as much cash away as possible, because once that first baby comes, things are going to change. You're going to be,
Yes.
you change, like before we had the boys, it's like, I didn't mind working. I work all day, every day. But after I had my kids, I was like, oh my, this is a lot. Trying to, I had an hour commute, work 8 hours, drive an hour home, come home, and you got to feed the babies, bathe the babies, and take care of your husband.
Lord, that's a lot.
It was a lot. And I was like, oh, this ain't God's will for my life. No, sir. So we've always been like, okay, let's make some adjustments. And that's my advice. Live on less. And that's with anybody. If you want to do the things you want to do, live on less. And that way you can have more freedom.
I think that's good. That's good.
You can have more freedom.
That's a good word.
Because we get trapped in this cycle of like, okay, I got to pay this and pay that. No, sir. That's not God's will. I'm sorry.
And I think too, like that's a super, super good point, Tami, about the whole living on less and downsizing. Because even in the article, like when you look at historically, like probably all of our families, well, I know the tallies is large in number, but
yes,
oh my, yes,
it's a whole slew. But your grandparents, they had multiple children. My great grandmother had 9. It was so not, and that was single births. It was not uncommon to have these large families. And it's funny because I was talking to my pastor today about this episode, and he was saying some of that was because they needed hands on the farm, and that could have been true too. But the other reality is, if you got mom in the house working and taking care of those type of things, it's like, I don't know, I don't know because I wasn't born in that era, but it didn't seem like it was uncommon to have multiple children. And everybody wasn't on the farm because, my grandmother and her generation, they were working. They weren't working on farms. They were out just working regular, domestic jobs, whatever the case may be. But I think, to your point, that's a really good point, because maybe some of the stress that these new couples are experiencing is because we were never equipped, whether it's, well, that's a whole nother subject, male or female, whoever's working. Somebody got to be at the house. Somebody got to work, and somebody's got to have some freedom to do that movement. But if both y'all strapped on both ends and burning candlesticks, you're going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed, even if that means working part-time. But you can only work part-time if you decrease debt and minimize and, take this minimalist approach so that you don't feel that crunch and that burden of having to do something.
Yes. And that's a major thing. It's like, you don't want to feel like you have to. And that's where we are in today's society. Like, well, I have to.
Because I wonder,
we want to have it all.
Oh, yeah, we want it.
We want it all.
I wonder what the statistics would show, or what the research shows for those parents that may, you know, that may have that whole concept where, you know, because I've heard that sometimes there's like a beef between the working mom and the stay-at-home mom, where there's some shaming that goes on.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I wonder if, you know, if spouses were having these conversations in premarital counseling that said, well, I don't mind, and this may sound sacrilegious to some people, but if you're a career woman and you're accustomed to having a career and you like what you do and you actually like your job, who's to say that you can't have the baby, go back to work, and the husband, you know, take care of everything, you know, before you, you know, come out for your maternity leave, and then you flip flop. But I know that's kind of sacrilegious in this day and age. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, what if, the point I'm making is somebody has to stay at home. Even if they're staying at home for a season, maybe this season you stay at home and be daddy, mommy, and I work, and then maybe the next season I stay at home and you work. But I think the issue comes in when you have two parents hitting that 9 to 5.
And that daycare is another house
A
payment.
whole mortgage, a whole
Oh,
mortgage.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Our I think we paid.
Ain't no big mamas no more.
Girl, I was gonna say that because when we grew up, you had aunties, you had
right?
Yeah.
that.
A little frozen.
Ooh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you had all these people that were around. Today, we don't have those same people. Big Mama, she
at
at work too. She at the club.
Well, she either at the club or she at work.
Big Mama is my age.
Right.
Yeah, that's come
now,
on.
I literally
It's the
met
truth.
somebody today that has 3 adult children born in 79. So she's 40, maybe going on 41 sometime this year. She has 3 adult children and 2.5 grandchildren.
Wow.
At 40. Wow. So, you know, big mamas ain't big mamas no more.
Yeah,
true.
And we don't have the help.
Little mamas.
I think, I hope, this is what I think, and I hope you said little mama. I just caught that. Oh, gosh. What I'm hoping and praying that with this old Rona is teaching us, even though she a beast, this whole quarantine, this whole shift that people have no choice whether they want to shift or not, has happened to society, that we are learning that you don't need the things you always thought you needed.
Yeah.
That you can live on less, and how important family and community is. Whereas we're so busy, we're like Tami said, the selfishness and doing our own thing. Like, I hope and pray, I want my boys to be like, Mama, you know, I'm having my first grandchild. Do you want to come, move closer? We'll move you out here. I'd be like, yes. And don't expect me to pay rent either. Look,
I know that's right.
That's right.
Come on now.
But you know, just with our society, like it's certain things that I think that this whole thing, quarantine, is teaching us, like the importance of family. We don't need as much as we think we need. And we got to start doing stuff smarter, because we don't know what's happening in our society. We don't know when all of a sudden not having the detriment of not having money stacked somewhere and not having savings, then this thing hit people like crazy. And we don't know whether every time something like this may happen again, whether the government will be able to send a little check or not, you know, and even if they do, if it's going to be enough, you know. And so I think we're going to start thinking differently, and we may have family conversations like, hey, we paying as much for you to go work. Your whole salary is going to child care. So how about somebody stay home and raise the child? There's a and I could say the name of it because he's a popular podcaster, but they have Belief in Familyhood. He's an internet personality, and him and his wife, they have a channel, and his situation was kind of like what Sweet was talking about. He got laid off or something to that either he got laid off or he just was working a job he couldn't stand. his wife got a promotion. She was doing something in education. And yeah, I think he might have got laid off because I think he was home. And she said, look, you don't like what you're doing anyway. Um, and I just got this promotion. Why don't you stay home with the kids? It's because childcare, and they live in California. The
Oh,
childcare
wow.
is going to eat up everything
Good
that we
gracious.
possibly do. And then, of course, what he did, it wasn't like he was home being shiftless, because I think that's what people were about, you know. But he started the channel. He already did music, so he had things he could do from home, you know.
Mhm.
And he became a stay-at-home dad. So those things are options. We don't have to be bound to um, traditional mindsets. As long as
Mm.
it works for our marriage and our family, and that it's not, violating anything where God's not pleased. I think that, we just got to think smarter. And
Mhm.
yeah, and our families can be a success, and we can grow. And if we do have a pregnancy oopsie, or we only wanted one and we got pregnant a second time, we ain't got to fall out about it.
Mm.
Right, right.
Yeah. But yeah, and going back to when you were saying before, as it relates to Christians and our mindset about having children, and I'm not sure what scripture it's in where it talks about it describes children as arrows, and
Arrows, yeah.
yeah, making sure
In
your quiver
Psalms.
is full. Well, you better know the word, Tammy. Amen. And making sure your quiver is full. And when you think about an arrow and being able to shoot them out into the world, like,
My God.
you
Yeah.
know,
And hit a
God,
target.
yes,
Yes.
God, he was so, he's always, if you read his word, it's generations. That is what
Mm-hmm.
he is after, is generations. And for Christians to be able to produce a righteous seed, to
Come
populate
on.
the earth, to be
That's
shot
it.
out, and to hit targets, like Sweet said. So, yeah, yeah, that was good when y'all
That
just thought
was
about that when you said that earlier.
that
Oh
was
my.
good.
Yes.
Yeah,
That,
oh,
go
go ahead,
ahead.
Tammy.
No, I was gonna say, because you had mentioned my family, like being so large.
Mm-hmm.
It is very large. My grandparents had 11 kids, no twins. Um, and just the richness of having a huge family is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mhm.
when you get
Yeah.
together and you come together, even Jock and his family. Um, so Jock has how many siblings? Five?
Okay.
I want to say five. And when we get together, it's just like
A lot of fun. Yeah.
it's so much fun. It's so many people. It's awesome. And for the people that don't have any kids, I'm like, I mean, how's Christmas? And I guess they're on the
Yeah.
island somewhere drinking some margaritas. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's just so awesome having like all these people around, and that's
Yeah.
Mhm.
part of me is like, gosh, I wish I got started earlier because then I had some more
Mhm.
babies. It's just the richness of that quiver
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
being
yeah,
being
that's
so
Wow.
good.
full.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Yeah.
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 And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what people are missing. I
Yeah.
think we are all missing it because most people these days like, oh, two, that's a good number.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
1.5. 1.5.
About to get a
Whatever
snip.
that is.
I think
And it
no, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like when you were talking about two, my two and no more. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's weird because like, it's my mom has three biological, and then we have my brother who she, raised. So it's four. But whenever I meet couples and they have more than two kids, I'm always like, oh wow. Like it's almost like a phenomenon.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
I know a young lady, or I know a couple, and they're like our age range, and they have four kids. And
Wow.
she just found out that she's pregnant with baby number 5.
Oh wow.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just was so moved by that, because I think for me, like as a kid growing up, I always wanted, y'all don't shame me, but I always wanted 7 kids. I don't know why. Maybe
Oh
I
my. You better get
No
some.
I
shame.
wanted it
No
to be
shame.
complete. But I wanted 7 kids, because it's what you were talking about, Holly. I wanted that I always
Mm.
loved the big families.
Yeah.
And granted, as I got older, I started realizing, wait a minute, I'm gonna
When am I going to
like,
be able to have one? Oh, help.
right. So, you kind of, you downsize your number to something a little bit more feasible.
Yeah.
But I think too, like, not being so moved by society, because I've had some very interesting conversations about my uterus. I don't know why people feel like they can just come up and be like, so when you gonna start having kids?
Won't they say
Why
it?
you all over here? Why you all in this? Leave me and my uterus alone. But I mean, my point, like, all jokes aside, is I think we live in a society where we are shamed, where people do look down on you. You're 40 and you don't have kids yet, or you're whatever and you don't have kids yet, or even the person who has multiple kids. You had 5 kids, but that's your issue. Don't make your issue my issue, because it's what you said. The quiver is full, and it's such a blessing when you. I come from a big family, and when we all get together, it's joy. It's medicine. It's good. It's therapeutic. It's community. And so, I think for me, that's important for believers to. I just find that very interesting when believers don't want to have children too, because it feels like we're allowing society to govern to us.
Yeah,
I'm not saying have multiple kids, but I'm saying if you like, I ain't having none, zero. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to that part you mentioned, like when you was like, don't shame me. I wanted to bring that up because people will do that. Society will do it. Your family members will do it.
Yeah, they will.
I got a family member that will remain nameless because I love her, but she always would try to govern me and my sister's womb, and like, well, you don't want no whole bunch of kids, do you? And I'm thinking, you got 5.
Oh, wow.
Like, you don't want no whole bunch of kids, do you? I wouldn't want no kids in a world like this. And I'm thinking, you had kids during Jim Crow. Why can't you?
Come on, somebody.
you had kids when they were still lynchings, for real. Like,
oh my Lord.
Why? And it's like it's under the guise of concern. But if I'm not concerned, I used to always tell that family member, I said, look, God will equip my children for whatever time He chooses them to be born in. I'm not worried or scared. I'm not going to be afraid not to have kids. I remember, because that'll happen. Like, people will try to fear you out of having kids. Like, they're so expensive and this world is so crazy. Well, sin been sin since the beginning.
Come on.
It's a world full of sinners, like it was a world full of sinners back in the day, and it's a world full of sinners now, but God is still God.
Yeah.
And, until the Lord just starts shutting up wombs, what I'm saying? You ought to feel free and no shame to not only have kids, but have kids, have them. You know what I'm saying? No, not governing how many. Now, I'm talking to healthy, families. I'm not talking to the drug addicted mother or the whatever. We're not talking about those outliner cases of people who are not in the right mental state to have a whole bunch of kids. But we're talking about healthy people, that people will kind of project their issue, as Sweet said, onto another person, and even the ageism,
Yeah.
that's too old to be having kids. Who are you?
Yeah.
If the woman womb still works, and her spouse are good with it, you don't shame somebody and tell them they're too old to be.
And you don't know why. I have a cousin who was closer in our age. They're a couple of years. I think they're like 44, 43-ish. And she had multiple miscarriages, 5 to be exact.
Wow.
So it wasn't an issue where they didn't want to have kids. They were having infertility, or, she was having issues with, carrying the babies full term or whatever. The Lord blessed, and they now have 2. But the point is, like, when you make these type of comments to women.
Yeah.
Why don't you? What are you waiting on? It's very insensitive. And I said it jokingly, but stay out of people's uterus because you don't know why. We
Yeah.
don't know why they can't have, or maybe it's not an issue of them not wanting it, but not capable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yeah. That's
All right,
good.
ladies. Well, I feel like we had us a good discussion this evening.
Yes, we have.
And I want to, Tammy, we're going to go around and we're just going to get final words. I want Holly and Sweet to start and let our guests have the last final words.
Okay.
Y'all
Sure.
have any?
Sweet.
Oh.
Oh.
Holly?
Oh, I said sweet.
Oh,
Oh my
neither
God.
Sweet nor Holly have final words, and that's okay.
No, I didn't.
None.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say, with what we discussed, just trying to, reframe our thoughts as it relates to, having children and not being conforming to the world, but being transformed by the renewing of our mind, especially if you're a Christian, when it comes to having children and understanding that, God is all for children, for legacy, for generations. Um, you know, he is an efficient God. He desires that, when we come together as, Christians, that we would create a righteous seed in order to populate the earth. And you just never know who you're going to give birth to. So just being able to be a part of that process, you don't know who God is going to plant in your womb that could change the world. And just, keeping that in mind, and just understanding that, as you guys have stated before, I mean, I can't speak from personal experience, but that, it is going to be difficult, but understanding that if God gave you the child, he's going to give you the wisdom, he's going to give you the knowledge, the understanding in order to grow that child up the way that they should be, to be groomed and to be nurtured so that they can walk in whatever purpose that God has designed them to walk out on the earth. And so those would, be my final words, just to try to, reframe our thoughts. And hopefully this conversation has done that, to reframe our consciousness when it comes to having children, and not be thrown off by the signals that we get from the world as it relates to how we should respond to motherhood. So I hope I made sense, but that would be my final words.
Yeah, you made sense. I think my final words would be to any woman or any couple that's listening, is to, one, first make the decision that's obviously in the best interest of your family. But even in making that decision, be open to alternatives. So maybe if there's a situation where you may not be able to physically, biologically birth out a child, there are so many children that are needing mothers and fathers. So adoption is always an option. And I would encourage people to, if there are biological things that are taking place, to always explore the adoption route, because there's so many children that need to be mothered and loved. And there's more than one way to be a mother. So I think my final words would be just focused on exploring options if you can't birth children naturally.
Amen. All right, Tammy.
Oh my goodness, final words. I would say to get in God's word first and foremost. Get in his word and stay in his word, and just know that he won't put more on you than you can bear. And I think we need to get back to order in the family, and that will bring about, I think, more focus as far as what the family should be, because we're just all over the place right now as a culture. And looking at the big picture, it's like let's get back to okay, who are we? We're children of God. What does God say about marriage? What does God say about children? You know, children are a heritage, and you said it earlier,
Yeah.
legacy.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be so focused on just us and what we can do. And we can't be selfish. We have to come into this thing like we're just selfish as people right now. And I think that's what it gets back to. We want to do what we want to do when we want to do it, how we want to do it. Marriage is work. Kids are going to be work. But like I said, God won't put more on you than you can bear. Get in his word. What does he say about marriage? What does he say about kids? We just have to get into a different space in our mindsets. And I think society as a whole right now is focusing on that. April, you said it, this pandemic, what Rona is teaching us is that we can live on less, and that there's some things we can do without. And, I think it's coming full circle. We're coming back to, okay, let me focus on my kids. Let me focus on my family. And a lot of people are like, I can't do nothing with my kids. I can't teach them. Okay, this is how it was supposed to be. Your kids are supposed to be at home with you in the first place. Wow. And we've gotten so far from what is normal. Normal seems foreign.
That's
Unfortunately,
good.
normal seems foreign. So we have to break it down to the foundation. Just go back to the word, start there, and then rebuild our families.
Awesome.
Amen.
Yes.
Well, all right, y'all. Well, I feel like it's so many underlying truths that have already been revealed. I really feel like the gist of it all is children are a blessing, not meant to be a burden. Cast your cares upon the Lord because he cares for you. Amen. So whatever you feel like you can't handle, cast it off on the Lord. And this has been another installment of the Truth Reveal podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure y'all subscribe. Make sure y'all join up in all of our social medias, our Facebook, YouTube, Apple Music, all the podcasting sites that we're on. Just make sure that you all, subscribe and keep up what's going on. We just want to continue to encourage you. Y'all gonna be all right.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Yay,
Thank you, Tami.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.